Good evening. Welcome to APTN National News. I'm Melissa Ridgen. More promises today from the federal government about cushioning the economic blow created by COVID-19. With layoffs continuing and EI claims skyrocketing, the Prime Minister announced some measures that he hopes will take the sting out. Todd Lamarand has more.
Prime Minister Trudeau targeted small and medium businesses with today's announcement. They'll get interest-free loans of up to $40,000. And Ottawa will cover up to 75% of wages for qualifying businesses.
With these new measures, our hope is that employers who are being pushed towards laying off people because of COVID-19 will think again. And for those of you who've already had to lay off workers, we hope you will consider rehiring them, given this payroll support.
Trudeau said this measure will be backdated to March 15th.
We're helping companies keep people on the payroll so that workers are supported and the economy is positioned to recover from this. That is our priority.
Finance Minister Bill Morneau did not have details yet of which businesses will qualify.
The idea is that this is supporting businesses who really, they have been impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, so the revenue has gone down significantly, and they are keeping their employees on. So
today's daily COVID committee briefing was asked how long economic measures will be in place. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland could only say things will get worse before they get better.
And every single person who is physically distancing, every single person who is making the big sacrifice of not visiting a parent or a grandparent in a long-term care facility, every child who is not going to school is contributing to a better health outcome for Canada, and a better health outcome will mean a better economic outcome.
We're in it for the long haul. It's not going to be days and weeks. It's definitely months, many months. And the one thing that other countries are also looking at, and we're looking at as well, is there a possibility of a second wave?
Meanwhile, Trudeau mentioned additional measures will be announced soon to help youth, marginalized people, and people in poverty. Todd Lamarand, APTN National News, Ottawa.
A Montreal day shelter that caters to the city's Indigenous homeless has closed its doors because of the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not stopping them from serving their clients, but as COVID-19 cases continues to rise, questions are being asked if Montreal is doing enough for its homeless population. Tom Fenario reports.
This is Cabot Square. For decades now, it's served as a gathering place for Montreal's Indigenous homeless and at-risk population. Now, it's also home to the Resilience Centre.
The reason why we've moved outside into the park is we noticed this pattern of other centres around the city closing down or significantly reducing their services. What that led to was an increased concentration of people in the Cabot Square area, such that we could not continue to operate inside and maintain healthy distance among people.
The Resilience Centre usually serves its mostly Indigenous clientele in a space across the street from the square. But now the space is solely being used to make lunch to be served outside.
What we're doing here is basic needs. The people we're serving here are many, or even most, are people who are literally living on the street. That is to say, not using night centers or shelters. They're sleeping in alleyways, they're sleeping in abandoned buildings.
While the weather may be warming a little, Chapman says working out of the square is less than ideal. The city has in recent days announced shelter and screening facilities for homeless, including a wing of this old hospital. But they have yet to open. Sources tell APTN News that during a teleconference call Thursday night with Indigenous health agencies, the Health Department for South Central Montreal said they lack manpower and supplies. They were not able to respond to a request for comment before deadline. Late Friday afternoon, the city declared a local state of emergency to respond to concerns over how COVID-19 will affect the homeless.
You know, I do hope that with this increased attention that we're able to, increase the resources that are available to the population here, who really, at a time like this, with the spread of a virus, they can't just go home and self-isolate. All right, and so we have to think a little bit outside the box. How can we make conditions safer for them?
Tom Fenario, APTN National News, Montreal.
With at least 5 confirmed cases of COVID-19 on its territory and contact tracing underway, the Mohawk community of Kahnawake will open its own testing sites this weekend. The drive-through site will be next to the Cater Memorial Hospital Center. Screening will be by appointment only. Last week, the Territory's COVID-19 task force said there wasn't yet a need for local testing, but with the 5 cases at Kahnawake, there's concerns about possible community transmission of the virus now. The Mohawk Council's health authority says anyone with symptoms should be tested. Nunavut remains the only jurisdiction in Canada without a positive test for COVID-19. Officials have been addressing residents every weekday from the floor of the Legislative Assembly. Today's news is that 207 tests have been completed, 57 have been returned negative, 150 people are still awaiting their results. Nunavut's premier urged residents to keep their distance, stay at home, and do as much as possible to do their part.
And we should be doing this for the ones we love. If you love your kids, your families, your neighbors, then you practice social distance. It's for them, it's for yourself, it's for all of Nunavut.
As of today, there are a total of 104 people that have tested positive for the virus in Saskatchewan. 2 of those people are Indigenous and both live in the First Nation community of South End. The first person who tested positive has recovered and they've now been cleared. The second person is still in quarantine. The medical health officer for the Northern Intertribal Health Authority explains.
Currently, we do have 2 confirmed cases on reserve across northern Saskatchewan. They have completed the self-isolation. One has been cleared and has recovered, but we're still awaiting recovery of the second case.
We have to take a break, but still to come, some band council elections are going ahead despite the pandemic. We'll tell you how. First, here's tomorrow's weather forecast for the east and central regions. On the east coast, we've got 9 and sunshine for Fredericton, 2 and snow in St. John's. Inukjuak -14 and sunny skies. Kuujjuaq -10 and sunshine. 10 for Val-d'Or and Saint-Jovite and lots of sun there. Settles 3 and sunny. Ottawa 11 and sunshine. North Bay 6 and sunshine. Sunny and 9 degrees for Sioux Lookout. Kapuskasing mostly sunny and 10. The Paw 6 and snow. Same with Norway House. God's Lakes though sunny and 7 degrees. 5 and sunshine for Winnipeg. 9 and sunny for Brandon. Saskatoon, sunshine and 6, same with Yorkton, 11 for Estevan and Regina. Buffalo and Narrows will be snowing at -1, same with La Rouge, -15 and some snow for Stony Rapids. Welcome back. It's election time for a number of First Nations, but what does that mean during the COVID-19 pandemic that's keeping many people at home? Willow Fiddler has this report.
We have social distancing protocols in place as per request by the community.
This is what Election Day was like on the Shoal Lake 39 First Nation in northwestern Ontario during the COVID-19 pandemic. Tanya Cameron is the electoral officer. She asked Indigenous Services Canada to delay the election for 2 weeks because of the pandemic.
That they're concerned about the level of traffic in the community. I know that they already put up a checkpoint because they'd like to limit the number of people coming in and out.
There was no clear response from the feds, so they went ahead, pandemic or not. But COVID-19 wasn't their only concern. Like many reserves, Shoal Lake 39 is still under Indian Act regulations. No election means no council. Maggie Wente is an Anishinaabe lawyer in Toronto. She explains.
So under the Indian Act, there's a 2-year term limit, and then under the First Nations Election Act, there's a 4-year term limit. And there's no possibility within those acts to extend those term limits.
The term for Shoal Lake was up on March 25th. Their election was March 26th. If they postponed their election, they would be in a bureaucratic limbo. In a phone interview, Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller said he has no authority to postpone Indian Act or custom elections.
What happens factually under the Act is that authority then goes and vests in the band manager, which is not necessarily the ideal outcome. So there isn't a gap per se. There's just an inconvenience, a very, very, perhaps an undesirable governance result, which vests band-like powers within the band manager. not the ideal outcome. So
Wente says the government needs to be flexible.
And if we're in a situation where we're saying that one level of government isn't going to recognize a First Nations government, that's something that creates extraordinary instability. And it creates extraordinary instability in a time that's already unstable.
A March 19 internal Indigenous Services email says councils can postpone their election, but that won't extend the council's term of office. And at the end of the mandate, a First Nation will find itself dealing with a governance gap. At least 16 other First Nations in Ontario will be in the same boat in April, Wente says, but not First Nations under what's called a custom election code, like Lac La Ronge in Saskatchewan. They extended the term of their council until the end of April. Chief Tammy Surson-Cook says it's about the health and safety of her community. That March 19 internal memo, the one that mentions the governance gap, says band councils should make sure voters bring their own pens and pencils to vote. Back at Shoal Lake 39, Cameron says she didn't receive any information from ISC.
We just did our best with the community, and my suggestions about how we can protect community members here lessen chances of exposure. So
at the end of the day, Gerald Lewis was re-elected chief of Shoal Lake 39, and Miller has since tweeted, Canada recognizes the health risks of holding elections during the COVID-19 pandemic. We therefore recommend that First Nations do not go forward with upcoming elections and will work with communities that choose to postpone their election to ensure leadership continuity. Willow Fiddler, APTN National News, Thunder Bay.
We want to hear what you think about this governance gap for some First Nations or band council elections that are being held during this pandemic. Here's how you can share your thoughts. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca. You can find us online at aptnnews.ca and on youtube.com/aptn news. You can also follow APTN News on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for more Indigenous news. A First Nation in Northern Ontario has asked the Prime Minister to call in the military as flooding season is about to begin. Saskatchewan floods every year, and its citizens are typically flown to southern cities, but that's not an option now with COVID-19. And so far, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau hasn't responded to their requests. They want the military to help move them to higher ground up the Albany River. Joining us to talk about that and more is Indigenous Services Minister Mark Miller. So can you tell us what plan has the federal government put in place to help the people of Saskatchewan? We need kind of details because they say they haven't heard from the Prime Minister.
Well, our officials are in contact with their leadership to look at a range of options, obviously with the threat of seasonal flooding and the threat of COVID. It's a different set of parameters and a different risk assessment. So we're looking at all options, and we're actively engaged with leadership to make sure that they take the option and assess the risk that presents to them, particularly with the potential threat of COVID-19.
So some would say, wasn't this preventable? I mean, there was promises made by your government to Saskatchewan that they would be relocated, that community, to higher ground.
Well, these are all these ongoing conversations, and there are sites that are proposed, and it's just a question of moving forward with leadership to make sure that those are properly considered and financial allocations are made to ensure that they can execute at the timing and pace that they so choose. And these are constantly ongoing conversations with our communities. Saskatchewan is one of a number of communities that are vulnerable, and this is something of particular importance, particularly during this pandemic.
Another COVID-related issue is First Nations youth aging out of the on-reserve child welfare system at a time when this is, there's nowhere for them to go. Why isn't the government doing something to make sure that these kids aren't aging out, or is there something being done that's ensuring that they're staying where they are, fed and sheltered?
Oh, absolutely, Melissa. We are not going to leave people behind, and as you know, these are determinations that are made by the provinces as to whether to extend those periods, and they will absolutely have the backing of the Government of Canada, the financial backing of the Government of Canada. We know that Ontario has moved. We know that other provinces were moved, and we are in constant communications with the provinces to ensure that seamless care is provided, and to the provinces that we obviously encourage the provinces to extend, and they will have the backing of the Government of Canada.
I mean, given just the state that we're in with this pandemic, can you do more than just encourage provinces? Is this something that the government has talked about, making provinces ensure that kids don't age out?
Well, it's absolutely what we want to achieve. Absolutely, we're looking at a number of options to make sure that the most vulnerable people in our society are taken care of, and kids aging out of care that are in the Child and Family Services system are some of those most vulnerable. So absolutely, we'll be having those conversations with provinces.
Okay, well, Minister Miller, thanks so much for taking time to join us today. Stay healthy.
Thank you. You too.
Still on the topic of kids in care, the impacts of COVID pandemic have absolutely hit the child welfare system. In Manitoba, children, youth and families are now seeing that impact. The province has nearly 10,000 kids in care, about 90% of whom are Indigenous. Brittany Hobson shows us what families can expect and the advocates who are working hard to ensure that children get the support they need.
Since COVID-19, Manitoba has implemented several new service guidelines for the child welfare system. But family advocates like Mary Burton are saying the new protocols are working against some families.
Some of our families do have the agencies trying to work with them and get the visits happening, even if it is by a video chat or a phone call or FaceTime or Facebook. They're trying to utilize the social media as much as possible. But then there's some agencies that have just outright said, no, we're not doing it.
The province considers family visits essential, but says it's up to social workers to determine potential public health risks. Burton worries the cancellation of visits will be detrimental for kids.
It's hard on their mental health. It's hard on their emotions. They don't know what's going on. They're feeling afraid. They don't know what's happening with their families. And so it's just making more trauma for the children to try and say, no, you can't visit your family at this time because of this pandemic.
COVID-19 is also on the minds of youth who are aging out of care. Manitoba advocate for children and youth, Daphne Penrose, says her office is fielding calls from those youth.
There's lots of concern that this particular situation is going to increase that vulnerability and risk for kids. So really hoping to see some really good support for them happening over the course of the next several weeks as well.
The Ontario government recently decided to extend services for youth aging out. Manitoba Premier Brian Pallister wouldn't commit to the idea, but instead said they are looking at various options.
Everything's on the table. We're looking at what we can do to maintain services at the highest possible level in the face of massive challenges.
Manitoba has halted the decision to end the practice of issuing birth alerts. Families Minister Heather Stephenson previously said they would be discontinued in April. The controversial practice often sees newborns apprehended at birth when the mother is deemed at risk. In a statement, Stephenson said, "While we are committed to ending birth alerts, now is not the time to implement a broad system change that would put additional pressure on our healthcare system at a difficult time." Burton says this is devastating for families, and the move may create more stress for mothers about to give birth. Brittany Hobson, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
Time for another break, but when we come back, what happens when a child dies in foster care? Perhaps not what you think. We'll hear about a Saskatchewan mother who's been fighting for justice for years. Stay with us. In northern Alberta, we got -1 and mostly sunny for Fort McMurray, -14 and sunshine for Fort Chip. 0 and mostly sunny skies for Red Deer, 15 and sunny for Medicine Hat. Tofino, 9 degrees and rain, 7 and rain for Quesnel. Prince George, rain and 3 degrees, -13 and snow for Fort Nelson. Sunny skies for Dawson City, -11, -20 up in Rock River. Wrigley, -15 and sunny, -21 and sunshine for Yellowknife. In Nuvik, -23 and mostly sunny skies, -22 in Fort McPherson. Baker Lake, mostly sunny, -24. Chesterfield, though, snow, -23. Igloolik, -27 and cloudy skies. Clyde River, -11 and Pangertung, -14 with sunshine. Welcome back. Indigenous children now make up more than half of all kids in care across this country. What happens when those same children die in the system? Tonight, APTN Investigates brings you the story of one mother's search for answers into the death of her infant son. She wants to know why it took over 7 years to get a copy of his autopsy report and the reason that no inquest was called into his sudden death. Cullen Crozier produced the documentary Death in Care. He joins us now from his home in Yellowknife. Cullen, how did this story come about?
Yeah, basically we were contacted by a mother whose 17-month-old son died in care of Saskatchewan's Ministry of Social Services. And essentially she had some problems or some unanswered questions with the manner in which he died, and she reached out to us to try to answer some of those questions. And I think part of the reason why she had these concerns was because it took over 7 years for her to get a copy of her son's autopsy report. And yeah, that's kind of where the story starts, and we were hoping to answer some of those concerns that she had.
As you said, getting a copy of an autopsy report of your child who dies in care 7 years later, I mean, that's obviously, there's lots of questions around that, which you will get into in your story. I want to know that there was no inquest into this death in care. There was no inquest called. How come?
Yeah, inquests, I guess, aren't mandatory for children who die in care of the system. I was kind of surprised to find that out myself. It's not like in jails, if somebody dies, a prisoner dies, then inquests are mandatory. They have to happen. But with children in care, that's not the case. We spoke with the chief coroner of Saskatchewan, and basically he told us that cases with children in care should be dealt with on a kind of case-by-case basis. And the circumstances really dictate whether there should be a coroner's inquest or not. So that's basically what that boiled down to.
Well, I look forward to seeing this. This is on APTN Investigates right after the news tonight. Thanks for taking the time to give us a little insight into what to expect.
Thank you, Melissa.
A documentary about the Black and Indigenous fight against environmental racism in Nova Scotia can now be seen by international audiences. There's Something in the Water is directed by actor Ellen Page and Ian Daniel. It premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival last fall, and today it was released on Netflix. Michelle Frances Denny of Pictou Landing First Nation is featured in this film, and here's what she had to say about her experience.
So I'm excited. People are going to get to see it. I'm a little bit nervous of, I'm kind of a hot mess in the film because I'm so emotional, and I did have some personal feelings like, oh my God, I'm just a train wreck, and I'm so emotional. But the response has been really good because I think people realize my passion, and they fully understand, that it's coming from my heart, and that is comforting to me.
Definitely something to check out on Netflix, since we're all at home watching Netflix these days. We're all out of time for your news tonight. I'm Melissa Ridgen. Thanks for joining me. Stay tuned now for Cullen Crozier's documentary Death in Care. That's right now on APTN Investigates. Take care.